Hey guys, it's Mike here from Taylor RC, and today we're just going to do a top-end rebuild tutorial on the Taylor 35. So let's just crack straight into it. First thing I would always do is pull your spark plug cap off and then just undo your spark plug. Let's hold the motor safely there and then wind that plug out, put it to one side. Now let's remove the whole side assembly. So let's just start off with these two Phillips screwdrivers here. They're Phillips 2 if you want to be precise. I'm just going to use a gun for speed. Then these little air guides here, just pull out. If you just sort of wiggle them out, they're slotted into a little slot down this fan cover, and then little tabs on the inner fan cover on the crankcases. So now we've got that loose, we can detach the stop button from the fan cover and now remove the fan cover. These are just 4mm Allen keys, socket caps. I'm just going to use a gun to cheat slightly and speed up. M5/20 socket caps there in case you lose them. Put them bolts to one side, put our fan cover over there safely. So now we've got the side of the engine. You don't actually have to take the coil off to remove your cylinder. In fact, you may find it easier to leave it in place because then you're not going to change your coil gap. We only use one thickness of base gasket on the 35 and it's pretty consistent and accurate between cylinder to cylinder. So your air gap will, as you rebuild it, will end up being correct. I am going to remove the coil for the sake of the video, but as I say, it's not something you actually have to do. So I'll just undo these two M4/16 socket cap bolts here and wind them out with a 3mm Allen key. Now as you remove this coil, rotate it so the magnets aren't fighting you, and then put that to one side. You will notice that there's these two little isolation spacers. Don't lose those. They're just a heat spacer between the coil and the cylinder, and they also just pack it out to the correct depth. Also, just note the way that in case the bolts come out, this earth wire goes onto this bottom bolt on the outside. So that's that. We've now got ourselves down to a long block, and we're going to remove the billet cooling head. So there's 8 M5/12 socket caps on top here. These should just sort of give you a little jerk as you're undoing them. They are tightened to 6.5 Newton meters. The torque specs for the whole engine are on the website, on the Taylor RC website, in the user manuals section, which is like our download section. You can nip on there. Just speed this up a second. Beware of using impact wrenches when it comes to redoing bolts. You can so easily strip a thread because these modern things are so powerful. Right, don't need to move your manifold. That really can just stay with the cylinder, to be honest with you. I said this is a new engine, so we're not actually servicing it. We're just using it as an example. These main 4 cylinder bolts here will be a little bit tighter, and they have a longer, deeper thread, so a bit more winding out. They're an M5/20 socket cap, and they should be tightened to 8.5 Newton meters. Let's just whip down in here. Now I've got them loosened up. Get in there with my gun and cheat a little bit for speed. And now we've got them loosened off, we can gently slide our cylinder off. I'll just grab the piston there so that you're not clattering against the crankcase as you pull it off. And you got it safely there. Obviously don't lose these bolts. They have spring washers on them on the actual 4 main bolts there, so don't lose those, and certainly don't let them drop into the cylinder at all, into the crankcases, apologies. Now we've got our cylinder removed. We can see the piston ring assembly, and up underneath there we can see the thrust washers and small end bearing hiding in between them. So whatever it is that you're taking it apart to service on this top end, service would be most likely be the piston and ring, or just the ring if you're being particular over a short space of time and trying to keep it to the absolute ultimate of performance. So this would be my tactic. We've all got different approaches, I'm sure, but this would be my tactic for removing the piston circlips, which are a really important part of the engine and often rushed and overlooked and can cause a lot of money's worth of damage if they're not respected properly. Now, in terms of keeping the video to simple tools, I'm just going to use an ordinary screwdriver. The actual width of the blade of the screwdriver is relatively important. You don't want it too wide so that it's filling that 8mm slot there for the gudgeon pin. You want a bit of room there so that you can play with it, and we'll use it for refitting as well, which makes life easy. So to take it off, I mean, you can use like a pick or something and just rip it out, but there is obviously a small risk of damaging the bore of this gudgeon pin hole. So when you put a new pin in, or you pull the pin out later, it'll be difficult to push out because you've damaged the channel. So I would recommend trying to use this method. It's probably going to go wrong for me because I'm doing it on video, but if you try and get the screwdriver in there and hooked under the little tab on the clip, you should, he says there, just be able to pop that off. So it pops it off. You do not reuse these. You know, they must be thrown away once you finish with them, and you never reuse them, just in case you've damaged them at all when they were first fitted or when they've been removed, because they can lose their tension very easily. So now we've removed that clip, we can turn the engine over, use a small poker of some sort. I'm just going to use my 3mm Allen bit there, push the gudgeon pin out to the point at which it goes past the thrush washers, and they can pull the piston off there. Yeah, so most likely you'll be doing this, using this video to change the piston, so we'll throw that in the bin and we'll put our new piston kit on. All the spare parts for the engine, you may have noticed if you've been on the website, both the Taylor RC and Detroit Performance website, you've got a full range of parts. Every single part for the car, including the crankcases or anything that you may need, is available in stock, ready to ship same day. So we couldn't have given you a better support for the engine there, I hope. And if there's anything else that we've missed or you guys want, please just send us an email and it will be on the shelf. It'll probably just be missed off the site. But I think we've covered it all. So let's just pull our thrush washers off and a small end needle bearing. So you could be inspecting that. Obviously these do have a longer lifespan than the piston, but for the sake of the cost, if I'm doing a piston change, it's probably run long enough that I'd want to be replacing the small end bearing as well. So that would be a recommendation there. And the thrust washers, again, are not an expensive part. They can be changed because they just take a little bit of wear on the inside of there. So let's just say, and this is obviously a new engine, so we're just going to put it all back as it was. But one thing I will mention, when you are working on the piston and the connecting rod, please never put any side load on the connecting rod. It is not designed to take side load. It's only designed to take load up and down the length of the rod as the engine is running. And you can see by the thickness of that rod there, it is not intended for any side load. So try and be respectful when you're working on it. Just a bit of mechanical sympathy, as we call it, and take your time. This is not a job to be doing in a rush. I'm sure there'll be an occasion where a racetrack, if you guys are a racer and you've got to do it in a rush. And if that's the case, just try and use your brain. So anyway, let's put it back together. So we're going to put our needle bearing back there in the small end of the connecting rod. We're going to put our thrush washers either side of it. They have like a cup shape, so get them around the right way. They won't work the other way. Excuse me. And then we've got our piston here already pre-assembled because it's been taken off. But what I would recommend is getting one side of the clip in. I do it so that if I've got the arrow, which is the exhaust side of the piston pointing to my left, I have the piston this way up and I put the clip in. Take the gudgeon out. I will sit it with the arrow to the left. I put the clip in from the top here. That means I know I'm going to get it the right way around when I want to make it easy for myself putting it back on, and I'll show you why. So hold your piston here. Now I'm turning it round, so the exhaust side of the engine, this is the exhaust side, the shorter side of the case, for ease of looking. The longer side is the intake, the shorter side of the case is the exhaust. Arrow is towards the exhaust. You sort of keep the thrush washers together, which they'll pretty much hold themselves on, and you just push the gudgeon pin in there. Now the reason I've done it from this side is then I can sit it on that nice flat surface. I'm not having to sit it here fighting with the flywheel. I'm sitting it on the flat surface there. I'm keeping my hand on the piston con rod at all times to try and keep it right. Make sure that the gudgeon pin is pressed fully down, and then I'm going to get myself a new clip and just going to refit that in here. So again, this is just my tactic for doing it with a screwdriver, which hopefully you guys will have available to you. I would get it lined up and please look at this carefully, I hope it's coming out clearly, I would have it lined up just in that position, i.e. the hook of the clip, I'll try and do it perfectly. The hook of the clip has just started in the bottom half of the groove, and the other tail of the clip is sat up, just kissing that edge of the top side of the groove. And the reason for that is you're going to use your left thumb, or other way around if you're doing it opposite, to keep pressure on the clip, and I'm pressing on that relatively firmly. And I'm going to use the blade of the screwdriver to get in there and hook the little edge of the clip there, the tail that sticks out in the middle, and I'm going to twist while pressing down. Now this end of the clip is already located in the bottom groove, so hopefully, and that's worked for me, and you can just hear it click there if you did, and that's now snapped into the groove. And that's quite important that you get that little snap noise. I'm not meaning to dwell on this too long, but it is such an important part of the engine. If this comes out because it wasn't fitted correctly, you are in a lot of trouble. So that little snap, and you just give the clip a little tap just so you know, oh, that's under tension. Yeah, I can really feel that's expanded out into its groove and has not been damaged while I've been fitting it. So that is nicely set in its groove, and that is where I would leave it. The gap halfway between the tail end there and the end of the ring is facing directly toward the top of the engine, so that you know it's located fully in the bottom of the groove, and the end of it is located, if you can just see that if I get the camera on it, sorry, I'm trying my best here, the end of it is located there, and the end of it is located in the groove there. So all 3 points of it in the middle and both ends are located in the groove. We can't be any more clear on that. Hopefully you've now got your piston clip fitted correctly. So we know we've got it right because the arrow is pointing to the exhaust side of the engine. If you're servicing an engine that's done quite a bit of work, you will probably find deposits of base gasket that have stayed stuck to the crankcase. As the gasket's hot or cold quite a few times, it will most likely adhere to the crankcase and adhere to the barrel. I mean, this one, because it's all new, has just decided to stay perfectly intact, stuck to the cylinder in perfect condition. So I am going to safely reuse this now. But normally speaking, you will replace that every single time you service the engine, because it will have torn in some way, or even just little specks of it will have pulled out from the material and stayed stuck on the crankcase. So make sure you clean both surfaces fully. If you don't have, trying to think of simple tools, a brand new Stanley knife blade, that would be a perfect tool for the job. Nice and sharp, you can just very carefully scrape round the surface, scrape round your crankcase, making sure you do not get any material inside the bottom hands of the crankcase. If you're unsure at all, use some rag or tissue to block the hole completely off, especially these little oil holes to the bearing. You do not want debris going down inside there. Otherwise you've done more harm than good by opening your engine. So all of this just comes down to taking your time. You know, that is the ultimate guide. Now you've got your piston ring fitted, you want to get the gap in the ring lined up with the peg, which sits over here towards the exhaust side of the port, facing over towards the fan. That's the peg of the piston, and the end gap must be lined up with that. That's the only way that it'll fit correctly. With your base gasket fitted, whether you pop it onto the cylinder, they are a nice precise fit, the gaskets, so they can locate on these two locating lips of the cylinder. So you can push your gasket on there and it should sort of reliably stay on there and not fall off. Also note, when you're fitting your gasket, the profile of the transfer ports is quite precise to the gasket, and there is a right and wrong way of doing it. So if it lines up with the port correctly here, i.e. all the way around the edge, there's no overlaps, you know, it's sitting properly, you've got it the correct way around, so that's all good. One of my bolts has decided to pop out because I was turning it upside down to show you. I am just going to make my life easy by putting it back in its place. Right, I'm going to do it this way. So I've got the arrow facing me, I can see the ring end gap there, and I'm going to just twist the engine a little bit to give myself a little bit of connecting rod to play with. That's right, there we go. I can see the gap there. I've got it pinched now with my fingers. So I'm using my fingers there to pinch the ring. I'm going to bring the cylinder over it, and the tapered edge of those two locating lips are going to come on sideways and just start to take hold of the ring and take over from your fingers. So as you're gently sort of putting it on here, the tapered piece of the cylinder is just taken over from your hands. The ring is now pinched. Check at this point that you don't force it on incorrectly. The gap is in line with the peg, and then just gently shimming her down. I should have added, obviously wipe the inside bore of the cylinder with some 2-stroke, some nice clean 2-stroke oil. You've probably cleaned it in the process. Hopefully you have given it a good clean and inspection. Give it a nice little wipe of oil so that you have some lubricant there ready, and then just lower your cylinder down onto the crankcase. Make sure it's nicely lined up. The holes in the cylinder are pretty precise, so you'll know you've got it correct. Once all 4 bolts started, we'll just do it for you here now. Get all 4 started, you'll see there's not much play on the cylinder at all. You know you've got it located beautifully and it's lined up. See there, there's just literally nothing because the holes are so precise. My hands are moving and the cylinder's not moving. So tighten that down. I'm not going to use the gun for the sake of it. It's only 4 bolts. Get that located. I would work the crossway, so start on that one then to go to this one. I'm just getting them all nipped at this stage. I'm not going to go, well, that's just the oil wiped in there. And then finally across to this side. Working it across that way, you're pulling the cylinder evenly. You're not doing these both tight and then doing those both tight, just for good practice really. I'm not going to break the torque wrench out now because my hand is a human torque wrench and we don't need to waste time for the video. But these are 8.5 Newton meter, these 4 bolts. And they have a spring washer on each one to prevent them coming loose. So we have those 4 bolts done up nice and tight at their correct setting. The cylinder is now back fully on. Just give the piston a rotate. That's just a bit of oil there with aluminium colouring. That's all good inside. Just give it a rotate. Yeah, you know that it's moving nice and smoothly. It's got some resistance because it's got a nice, new ring in there against the bore. But you know it's not too tight that you've fitted it. You forced it on with the ring in the wrong place. So that's all good. Now we're going to refit our cooling top with the 8 bolts. That O-ring has stayed in the head for me because it's obviously been under some compression. It squished itself into its groove. When you put a new O-ring on there, you might find that it wants to fall out all the time. Just use a bit of grease or a bit of thick oil so that it stays in its groove, and that'll make your life a lot easier. Now line the cylinder up. You'll see that there is a little locating lip that slots into the top of the cylinder to try and make it really easy and accurate. So that locates in. And now do your do your 8 bolts up. The prototype had 4 and it wasn't enough of a nice seal for the amount of compression this engine has. So changed the design to 8 and it was perfect. Put them all up there. And now go around and I will torque them up. Again, I'm not going to break the torque wrench out for this video to save time. This is boring enough hearing me rattling away as it is. These are 6.5 Newton meters, these bolts, for you torque wrench guys, which is good practice. Never be afraid to take your time and do things properly. So I'm just going to go round them all now to make sure I've not missed one. It's all nice and snug and even. Cool, that's my long block sealed up again. It's all good. She turns nicely and it's sealed up and safe. So I'm just going to rebuild the simple parts now. 3mm Allen key again, these 2 M4x16 socket caps. I've then turned the rotor so that the solid piece that hasn't got magnets on is at the top there. Gives me a nice guide for the coil. So we got both of our spacers on there now. We're going to refit the coil. Just line that up carefully so the spacers don't fall off. Just get these down somewhere in. Now Zenoa makes a really nice air gap tool. There's no point me competing with that because it just does the job perfectly. I haven't got one with me here today, so I'm just going to use a feeler gauge. But anyway, 0.3 to 0.5 millimeter is fine. The Zenoa air gap tool is 0.3. It's a fairly snug gap. To be fair, these things will run up to a mil gap at least. I've tried it out of pure interest so that I could answer questions and make it easier for me to troubleshoot later. But you just get your air gap tool, whatever you're using, between the coil and the flywheel, and then I should turn my tool around. Knit these up. 4 Newton meters for these two, or by feel if you're experienced and confident. Being M4s, they would be quite easy to strip in the casting there, so just be careful. So now you've got your coil back on safely. You've got a nice air gap. That's all good. You can refit your fan cover now. We're on to the basic stuff now on the home stretch. Fit these 4 M5/20 socket caps. This is a CY fan cover. I mentioned my first launch video, but maybe you guys haven't seen it. It's the most universal fitment fan cover, and it's also really good quality, so we were really pleased to be able to work with those guys. So to nip them up, 7 Newton meters would be fine for these 4. Excellent. And now just pop that stop button back in its little locator. So if you're fitting a kill switch, for example, you could use this video just to learn how to get in here, but most guys are quite comfortable fitting kill switches and they fit in the same way as normal. Now you may have noticed that ring terminal there on the coil. We do supply a ring terminal with the engine in the box, little red new retail packaging here so that I could show you. We do give you a little ring terminal just in case you need to cut your kill switch and replace the terminal on the end of the kill switch wire. So now let's just do a quick spark test. Pop the plug firmly into the cap so that it's got a good connection. Hopefully you can just see this here. Now you hold the end of the plug where you can see it, but firmly against the metal of the cylinder head, and then you'll just pull her over. Hopefully you can just see that nice little blue spark on the video. If you're unsure at all, just turn the lights down. A dark room is always the best solution to be if you're unsure whether you've got a spark or not. I can't see it properly. So now let's put the plug back in. Tighten that up properly. Put the cap on. And now we're just going to replace the air guides. This little side air guide just locates in the bottom in the case there and into the fan cover, just retained by that Phillips number 2 and there. Twist the coil wire out of your way, and then with the other air guide, again similar fitment, just slots into the case there and then locates around the fan cover there, and finish off with the Phillips 2. Now just beware that the coil wire has sat into its proper little groove between the 2 air guides. That is important because if it's caught here and pressed against the head, as the engine gets really hot, it could just start to work its way through and melt the wire. So make sure it's sat in its groove. It's fairly robust in there. It's not going to come out easily. The coil wire is of a length to make sure that it stays in its groove. And if you do decide to get our little billet spark plug adapter and then spark plug roll cage, they are a 2-piece setup. It's the same actual roll cage as our big bore engines, but there's just an adapter to be able to fit that same piece that we sell to you at cost price to try and help. So yeah, adapter plate and then roll cage keeps it in place as well, so it's another little advantage, and that should fit most fifth scales and especially useful for buggies and stuff. And that's it, done, serviced. Your engine is ready to break in again, and then put it under load and have some fun with it. So hopefully you guys are really enjoying your 35s. We've been really grateful for all the feedback. We've enjoyed all the banter and the fun and games online, but generally speaking, everything's gone really, really well, and you guys are really enjoying the sort of first stock version of the 35. We will, as promised on the original launch, release bolt-ons and upgrades, keep developing the engine, but our first edition is exactly where we wanted it to be in terms of performance. It's giving the competition a great battle, and we're, there's lots of guys enjoying them, and we're really enjoying all the feedback. So thank you for the support. We certainly can't do it without you, and we're just so proud that we're able to do it, really. We just feel lucky to have the the backing of you guys to be able to do this sort of stuff. So all the best, and take care. Speak soon.